Well, as climate legislation moves to the Senate and its upcoming bill now on hold, some see hopes dimming that anything is going to pass Congress anytime soon. Miles Grant is a contributor to grist.org. He has written extensively on the climate bill and other environmental energy issues, and he joins us now for a little insight. Miles, good to have you back.
Thanks for having me, Susan.
It does look like pessimism is growing about the chances of a climate bill passing through the Senate. How optimistic are you at this point?
Well, I think Congress is focusing its attention right now on a little something called health care reform. Certainly understandable that they want to give some attention to that.
I'm hoping to squeak this by before then, huh?
No, I don't think we have hopes of that. Then we'll have the August recess, and Senator Boxer has said as soon as we're back from that, we'll unveil our bill. And I think over the last year or so, we've seen a lot of skepticism about this Democratic Congress and Democratic president. They said, and we heard the Inside the Beltway talk, that we can't get the stimulus bill through. We can't get as big a stimulus as we need. We heard people say, oh, Henry Waxman can't get a climate bill out of his committee by Memorial Day. Then we heard people say, you can't get a climate bill through the House by the 4th of July. Now we're hearing people say you can't get a climate bill out of the Senate by the end of the year, and I'm hoping Barbara Boxer proves them wrong.
You're optimistic.
Absolutely.
So what about by December? I mean, you pretty much say it's critical that something happens, something is in hand in Copenhagen.
Right. The United States needs to show leadership to the world, and I think we saw a little bit of that at the G8 summit, where some developing countries had come together and said, we need to reduce our emissions now. Developed countries setting a goal of 80% by 2050, I think, is within reach, and by mid-century, limiting the global temperature rise to 2 degrees Celsius. I think we've seen some agreement there. If we can see some leadership from the United States Senate by then, not necessarily an agreed upon bill, out of conference committee from Congress, but at least the Senate on the verge of passing a bill, I think that gives President Obama tremendous leverage in Copenhagen.
What do you want to see? What changes would you like to see in the bill? I know maybe fewer credits given away.
Absolutely. I think we need to see more credits auctioned to make polluters pay for their carbon pollution. I think that's something reasonable and something that Americans certainly support. I think we need to see stronger short-term targets, as we were saying earlier, that Representative Waxman was looking for 20% by 2020. I think that's a much stronger short-term target, and I think you'll see some of that from Senator Boxer.
If this divide continues, do you think we may possibly end up with EPA regulating emissions through clean air?
Well, I think that's sort of the axe being held by a single thread of hair over this whole process. That
nobody seems to want it to happen, including Lisa Jackson.
I might like it to happen. if Congress can't act, I think the EPA has to.
Oh, right. I mean, they just say they'd prefer legislative action.
Right. I think that's the preference, to bring everybody together, to bring people from the Midwest, from the Southwest, from coal-producing states together and say, what can we agree upon? We don't want something that's going to be, re-looked at 10 years from now, in the shifting political winds. We want something that's going to be a basis moving forward for not just the United States, but for the whole world. And
you heard Chu's comments in China and, Beijing's latest comments. The biggest divide in climate talks, of course, developed nations, and who pays. Are you optimistic that one's going to be conquered?
Well, again, when we talk about United States leadership, we don't just talk about emissions targets. We're talking about developing technology that's going to allow these developed countries to move off of coal, off of these high polluting sources cheaply and easily. I think that's part of the United States leadership, that we do need to develop those technologies. Part of what the stimulus was about.
Unlike previous attempts, this time we have emissions targets coming without the technology ready yet.
Sure, and it is a great leap of faith that we are going to develop these technologies. But 30 years ago, if you told me I was going to be carrying a computer in my pocket in the form of my cell phone, more powerful than a computer that could fill an entire room, nobody would have believed you. And I think if 30 years from now we talk about getting power from sources that we don't even know about yet, I think we just need to set these goals and set American innovation to work.
Maybe that's just what we need to get the technology moving. Miles Grant, grist.org, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
We appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.